The Juab County Jane Doe, identified as Marilee Bruszer. Marilee went missing on August 22, 1978, from Long Beach, California. The passage of time, unfortunately, means that there isn't a lot known about her case. We know that they believed her to be murdered, and the police there did go ahead and classify her case as endangered missing. And as we know from many of these cases, they often won't take a missing report on an adult, saying they have a right to leave. Her family desperately tried to find her. They would eventually, in the future, declare her dead on August 22, 1983. Around the same time, in Juab County, Utah, there was another set of law enforcement officers that were searching to find the identity of a Jane Doe. The Jane Doe was found on September 3, 1978. She had on no clothes, and she was found near the Yuba Lake campground in Juab County. 3 women were fishing near the dam, and they found her instead. Once they examined her, she was around 5'2" and 110 pounds. However, in reality, Marilee was 5'5" and closer to 150. Even with a wide window of error, they were way off. They proclaimed that she had been there 3 months to 3 years. The reality of it was that she had been there 12 days. This is the reason I comment in these videos so often that if you're missing someone you love, just take the information given as a suggestion. It's definitely not a concrete fact. The errors in this case caused her to go unidentified for 37 years. There was a stroke of luck when detectives were looking through an evidence locker in the Davis County Sheriff's Office in 2013 on an entirely unrelated case, when he would come across an envelope marked "Hair from Yuba Lake Body." It turns out that Davis County Sheriff Captain Kenny Payne and the state medical examiner at the time that Marilee was found was careless, and they were known for misplacing evidence. Marilee's hair had gone missing, so detectives were thrilled to have her DNA. They immediately sent it off to Texas for testing in 2014. It would take until the following year, but her DNA was entered into a national registry for missing persons. It would be August of 2015 when her family was notified that Marilee once again had her name. I can't find an indication why, but in 2015, there were a whole bunch of these identifications that happened through NamUs. The best I can tell, people gave their DNA in hopes that a loved one would show up, but a lot of the checking hadn't been done until 2015. Once the identification was made, Marilee's family said that she was 33 and was living in the Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. Her family has absolutely no idea what actually happened. She just suddenly disappeared from her apartment on August 22, 1978. She didn't have any real known risk factors. She didn't hitchhike. As far as this case goes, they don't really know anything beyond this. If you have any information at all on Marilee's murder, please call the Long Beach Police Department at the number shown. Marilee Bruszer went unidentified for 37 years, and she was found 600 miles away from where she originally went missing. The squeeze play Jane Doe, identified as Millie Alvarado. Millie was born Milagros, Alvarado, in Ponce, Puerto Rico, in July of 1957, and her family eventually moved out of that territory into the U.S., eventually settling in Petersburg, Massachusetts. During her time in Massachusetts, Millie had 3 children, John, Jeanette, and Cynthia, but she struggled with heroin and eventually lost custody of those children, and she herself became homeless. She was living on the streets when she went missing. No matter what her struggles were, though, her family mattered to Millie. In July of 1994, right before she went missing, her niece, Jasmine, had given birth to her first child. Jasmine recounted that her Aunt Millie called to say how happy she was for her. Millie had told her that she couldn't wait to meet her child, saying she was coming to visit her at the Burbank Hospital in Fitchburg. So when Aunt Millie didn't arrive, they knew something was wrong. They wouldn't hear from her again. There would be no word as to what happened to her for 21 years. It would take a DNA test to find out what happened. Her daughter Cynthia described her as a big, beautiful woman with a big gold heart. Cynthia was just 2 when her mom disappeared. She said she was grateful for the chance to get to know her now. Her children found themselves faced with a pretty common heartbreak. They didn't know if their mother walked away on purpose, because either something happened to her or she simply chose to abandon them and walk away. And there is a certain amount of healing in knowing that that isn't the case, that her mother loved her. It would turn out that Millie was found on August 1st, 1994, by public commission workers. They had been cleaning the grounds of the Storybrooke Reservation in Hyde Park. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma. Millie was reported missing on August 20th, 1994 by her brother, who had no way of knowing that she had already been found 3 weeks earlier. While he was looking to find his sister, the city of Boston was trying to find the identity of the woman that they had found. They nicknamed her Squeeze Play Jane, based on the outfit she was wearing when she was found. Her brother Michael explained he was called to the police station in July to receive some of Millie's belongings. The belongings themselves had been seized in a drug bust on Rollstone Street. 5 men were arrested at the scene. Those belongings, in fact, included Millie's identification. Michael now believes it was these men who were responsible for Millie's death, but it appears the lead has gone completely cold, if it was even investigated at all. Like so many other cases, the error of estimates kept her unidentified. They claimed she was 20 to 30 years old, and in reality, Millie was 34. They believed she was 5'2". Millie was 5'6". Millie went missing only 60 miles away from where she was found, but these wrong estimations likely contributed to her not being identified. Millie's identity would go unsolved until February 2016, when she was exhumed and a DNA match was found. This one went through CODIS. They usually ask for 2 family submissions when somebody is submitting DNA for a loved one. In this case, Millie's sister Wanda and one of Millie's kids submitted their DNA. This case is frustrating just to see how close she was to her family all that time. Her family loved her and they didn't stop looking. Her sister Wanda tried to obtain Millie's dental records from New York at one point, but she was unable to receive them. Over the years, Wanda and her family kept putting up missing person photos. They put it in Fitchburg, they did nearby cities, and they even put it in New York City. Whenever a new unidentified person was found, Wanda pushed to find out if it was her sister Millie. Every time they said, "No, it's not your sister." For so long, there was just no answer as to what happened to her. Millie's sister Wanda spoke at a press conference. She went on to say, "I was not expecting to hear that she was found by Hyde Park. It was like, wow. But you know, it's closure for the family. We're going to bring her body back home and do what we have to do to give her a Christian burial." Anyone with any information on Millie's death, no matter how minor it might appear, is asked to contact the Boston Police Department. Several contact numbers are provided on the screen. Millie Alvarado went unidentified for 21 years. The Willets, John and Jane Does, identified as Kerry Graham and Francine Tribble. Kerry Graham had just celebrated her 15th birthday and was with her best friend, who was a next-door neighbor named Francine Tribble, who was 14. The two had been friends since they were small. They left their homes that day to head to the mall in Forestville, California. It was December of 1978, and they wanted to do Christmas shopping. However, there's no indication they ever made it to the mall, nor did they ever come home again. They were reported missing by both families, and all were clear that the kids weren't in distress. They believed they were kidnapped before leaving for the mall by somebody that they knew. However, there were no disturbances at either home, and although all of their belongings were still there, which includes medication Kerry was faithfully taking every day after surgery on her appendix, the police, however, were not convinced. They decided the girls had run away and hitchhiked somewhere, so they did not do a whole lot of active investigating. 7 months later, the skeletal remains of Graham and Tribble were discovered by 2 tourists traveling in Fort Bragg, California, on the afternoon of July 8, 1979. The couple were arguing and they decided to get out of the car near the highway. It was then that they discovered a bag of remains by spotting a skull. They marked the area with a can of soda and they immediately notified the sheriff. Amazingly, after 2 days, 90% of the bones were recovered. The age estimates were pretty accurate, as was the date of death. However, a forensic pathologist examining the bones would make a mistake that would doom the girls to not be identified. It was decided that it was one boy and one girl that were found. The autopsy reports erroneously concluded they were brother and sister. They stated their reasoning was that two people linked together and not being identified is unusual. Therefore, they must be brother and sister. It is shocking they didn't at least consider they could be the two girls missing from just 60 miles away. For over 20 years, the case was cold. In 2000, they were exhumed, and it was then that they would discover they made a serious mistake. It was puzzling that no one put two and two together, but 11 years later they tried it again, and this time a CAT scan created two new images. Despite the new images, nothing came from it. It would take DNA in November of 2015 to prove that the two girls were close by all that time. Kerry Ann Graham and Francine Tribble went unidentified for 36 years. The St. Petersburg Jane Doe, 1973. Identified as Janice Marie Young, born Janice Marie Brock. It was 1973, and a young woman named Janice Brock, who went by the name of Marie, was living in a home with a lot of people in Jacksonville, Florida. The police would meet with her about a case where she was a witness, so they knew her as Marie Brock. They described her as having track marks, which made them think she was a drug user, but there was no proof otherwise. The police describe her as living with a lot of people who were hippies, so it's entirely possible some assumptions were made that were not true. Shortly after her other interactions with the police, Marie was seen arguing with a man. The man would later be identified as Lawrence Dorn. Witnesses saw Marie with a knife and a broken bottle, threatening to cut Dom. It is unclear what they were fighting about, but Dom was able to shove Marie into the street. At that point, she was hit by a bus. Dom was later charged with murder hours after her death, but it was later acquitted as his intent could not be proven, and it did appear that it was self-defense. After all, there were many witnesses who heard Marie threaten him, and with this, the case went cold. It was her brother who had solved the case. He'd been trying to find her for years, but always looked under their legal name of Young. This time he searched for Brock, and he was shocked to discover that that name came up with a recreation of a girl that looked very much like his sister. It would turn out that Mary and her biological brother Tim went to live with the Youngs who eventually adopted them. This sounds like a happy ending for the siblings who got adopted together, but it wasn't. The Youngs frequently abused the two kids, and Tim walked in on his adopted brother assaulting Marie in a way that this platform doesn't allow me to say. It was hell on earth, and Marie had had enough. Tim recalled that his big sister packed up her belongings in a pillowcase that day. He would go on to say, "We went to the school and we got off the bus, and she said, 'I love you and see you later,' and I never did." It would turn out that she chose to run away from their home in Newport News, Virginia. Despite how hurt he was that she left him, he didn't forget his sister, and as soon as he could, he began looking for her. He knew she was hitchhiking, which meant that she could be anywhere. It turns out she hitchhiked rides to Jacksonville, Florida to escape her bad situation, only to find herself in another. She never had a chance. Marie went unidentified for 42 years. She was found nearly 600 miles away from where she originally went missing. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. If you could take a moment, please hit like and subscribe. We have new episodes every Monday and Thursday's episodes are always dedicated to John and Jane Does. Take care of yourselves and each other.